This is the Marriage Podcast, and I'm your host, Alexandra Stockwell. I'm a physician turned relationship and intimacy expert, and I specialize in showing couples how to have incredible, passionate relationships. I myself have been married for 25 years. My husband and I have 4 children and full professional lives, and we've created an amazing relationship. If you want to deepen your understanding of your own relationship and learn to access new heights of emotional, sensual, and erotic intimacy, you're in the right place because I will show you how. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, this is Alexandra, and if this is the first time you're listening to this podcast or you're just getting to know me, a warm welcome. I'm so glad you've come into my world. And if you're familiar with me, well, a warm welcome to you as well. And it means that you have probably heard me say that the most common relationship advice that is given throughout the world is that you really need to learn to compromise. If you want a great marriage, the key is to become good at compromising. And that just is wrong. If what you want is a conflict-free, neutral, comfortable, relatively bland, safe marriage, compromise is definitely the way to get there. You hold back on your desires so that your partner's not uncomfortable, and your partner does the same, and everything is very peaceful. And slowly you die inside. And after some number of years, you realize, how did I get here? And what about my passion and dreams and expanded self-expression? I go into so much detail about this in my book, Uncompromising Intimacy, because I believe so strongly that the key to a really great, nourishing, juicy relationship is when you don't compromise, but you learn to bring all of who you are to the relationship, accept your full self, and learn to love and accept the fullness of your partner. So this means not withholding, not disconnecting from something that's important to you in order to make your partner comfortable. It also means not dominating and expecting to get your way all the time. When I talk about being uncompromising, I'm not meaning that you're exacting and it has to be your way all of the time. That is not what happens in a relationship. When I use the word uncompromising, what I'm referring to is bringing all of yourself to the conversation, to the relationship, to the interaction, and inviting your spouse to do the same. And then together, figuring out how you want to proceed from there. So, Uncompromising Intimacy, which I detail in my book, is a really beautiful way of life. And it specifically counteracts the comfortable dullness and lack of passion that comes when you have compromise as a central way that you interact with your partner. The second most commonly known perspective, tool, approach to relationships, and when I say the second most commonly known, it's not that I've done careful research and tabulated this, but in my life experience, I think the second most common perspective or advice that's given is around the 5 love languages. You've probably heard what they are, and maybe you've even read one of Gary Chapman's books. Gary Chapman is the PhD and Baptist minister in North Carolina who's written the books in which he describes the principles of the 5 love languages and how to use them to improve your relationship. Now, why do I say you've probably heard of them? Well, those books have been translated into 50 languages, and 12 million copies have been sold worldwide. Plus, there are all the people who know about the love languages without ever having read the book. There are quizzes that you can take to help you identify which is your love language. And there are lots of different books for singles, for couples, for men, for women. It's a very richly developed and marketed concept. The concept is that we each have a unique love language, and the different kinds of love languages that Gary Chapman categorizes are words of affirmation, acts of service, receiving gifts, quality time, and physical touch. I'm going to say a little bit more about each of those, but the basic idea is that whoever you are, you have a primary way that you like to receive love, that when your partner expresses love through one of these 5 ways, the way that really speaks to you, then you feel loved, seen, and appreciated, and it's a nourishing experience. The problem is that the vast majority of couples have a mismatch in their love languages. So maybe your love language is words of affirmation, and your partner's love language is physical touch. So in order for you to feel loved, you need to hear words of affirmation. And in order for your partner to feel loved, he or she needs physical touch. But if you go the way of many people, you wait to experience being loved before you give love. And then you don't get your words of affirmation and your partner doesn't get his or her physical touch. That's kind of the way that works. So before diving deeper into it, I want to say a little bit more about each of these qualities. Words of affirmation that can sometimes be understood as compliments, words that say, I appreciate you and what's good about you. The main thing is that words of affirmation is a verbal love language, but it also can be a lot deeper than just compliments. It can be things like, I really love the way you say goodnight to the children. You're such a caring person. I saw the way you handled that with your boss, and I was so impressed. These are examples of words of affirmation. And the key thing is that what you see, you are actually expressing verbally, because the person for whom words of affirmation is their love language, they want to hear it articulated and named and spoken and not left to inference. For someone whose love language is acts of service, that is not a verbal love language. That person is going to feel loved by what you do. So taking the trash out whenever the trash gets full, or taking your partner's car to be cleaned before he or she even noticed it was dirty, or making the bed each morning. I mean, acts of service can be very simple, or they can be much more exotic. But either way, it's not really verbal. It's in the actions you're taking that the person feels loved. Receiving gifts, it's easy to dismiss that as a kind of superficial love language, because there are plenty of people for whom receiving gifts is not their love language. And for them, it's like, it's just stuff. But actually, for the person whose love language is receiving gifts, there is this exquisite experience that happens when the right gift is chosen. Because in choosing the gift and it being one that's wonderful, the person whose love language is receiving gifts will feel seen and understood, and like you've anticipated their desires. It's a really incredible version of the same thing that you're doing with words of affirmation, but you're expressing it verbally. And the same thing you're doing with acts of service, where you're perceiving what your partner's situation is and what would make their life better. And you're seeing their world and who they are, and therefore doing things that will make things simpler. The same thing with receiving gifts. It is a way of expressing that you know and love and see who your partner is. And so you choose just the thing that they may have yearned for or not even known existed. But as soon as they see it, it's like they feel gotten. It's like, oh, he knows who I am. And that feels so good. And that is expressed through choosing a piece of jewelry that she really loves, or buying shoelaces, which make her smile. Like, it can be expensive, it can be inexpensive. The point is that in receiving the gift, the I see you and I love you is experienced. For someone whose love language is quality time, it's really about being together. It's about enjoying one another. It's about being present. It's not about what you're saying. That would be words of affirmation. It's not about what you're doing. That would be acts of service. It's not about seeing you and anticipating your next need. That would be receiving gifts. Quality time is really about presence and in the moment attention. And for someone whose love language is quality time, they just are so nourished by being with you. And no amount of words of affirmation, acts of service, or perfectly chosen gift is going to touch what just being together will do. For the person whose love language is physical touch, well, that's about affection. And it can be about sensuality and sexuality, but it also can just be about a hug before you head out the door and another hug when you come back. It's about, while you're watching TV, having your hand on one another's lap or your shoulders brushing against one another. It's about, while I'm cooking, having my husband walk by and just lightly with the back of his hand brush my neck. That is saying I love you through physical touch. So the way this usually works is you can just hear words of affirmation, acts of service, receiving gifts, quality time, and physical touch, and know, oh, my love language is quality time, or my love language is words of affirmation. You can just self-identify, and you can go online and look for free quizzes where you answer a bunch of questions and it helps you identify what your love language is. And what can be really helpful is that you ask your partner to take it, and then you know what your partner's love language is. And the best way to apply this wisdom is, your partner knows what your love language is. You know what your partner's love language is. And then let's say my love language is words of affirmation and my husband's love language is acts of service. This isn't accurate necessarily. I'm just saying this as an example. Then anytime that I want my husband to know how much I love him, and I want to express my delight in being married to him, I'm going to do an act of service for him. I'm not going to spend a lot of time speaking words of affirmation, even though that's my natural go-to because it's my love language in this scenario. I resist expressing my love language the way I would, and instead use intention and attention to express my love in acts of service, because then he will receive it. He will feel loved, and my intention of conveying my love for him will be more successfully met. If, on the other hand, my love language is words of affirmation, I want my husband to know how cherished he is in this moment. And so I use words of affirmation to talk to him. He's just not going to feel as loved if acts of service is his love language. And the whole thing is going to be okay, but not as deeply satisfying as if I got out of my own way and expressed it in the way that he could hear it. So if you are in a phase in your relationship where there's disconnection, there's conflict, there's resentment, there's misunderstanding, there's stuckness, there's numbness, any of those flavors, I highly recommend that you identify your own love language and you ask your partner to identify his or hers, and you look for ways to express your love in your partner's love language, and you look for ways to request what you need to feel loved. And that will take the edge out of whatever situation you're in. And it may even take you all the way to resolution and feeling really good with one another. However, from my perspective, as a luxury love and intimacy mentor, this is just the beginning. It's like the 5 love languages are a great Band-Aid. They're really good for dealing with disconnection and kind of a crisis in feeling loved and expressing your love in your marriage. But if we go back to what it means to be uncompromising, to bring all of who you are to the relationship, be an acceptance of your full spectrum of body, soul, and spirit, and learn to make room to really accept and love all of that in your partner as well, then the 5 love languages, honestly, they become intellectually interesting and otherwise practically obsolete. And what I mean by this is that early in my marriage, I was very happy to understand the 5 love languages. And when I was feeling unloved or like I wasn't really being received as I expressed my love, I could switch into another way of doing it based on knowing our love languages. But now I think there is so much richness and gratification and turn on and passion in expanding from the inside out and receiving the love which is being given, no matter the channel. So if we go back to the example before where my love language is words of affirmation, instead of needing or requiring my husband to express his love through words of affirmation, I have expanded to be able to feel all the love in the acts of service, all the love in receiving well-chosen gifts, all of the love in the way that he prioritizes quality time with me. And I have learned to feel the love that comes through physical touch. Another way of getting at what I'm pointing to is if you think of a rainbow, where let's say each color is a different kind of love language. There have been times in my life where my favorite color was purple. And so when given a choice to choose things, I chose purple. That was my favorite color in my childhood. I think now it might be red. And I previously had a time when I just was thrilled by blue. But the fact is, when it comes to communication, expressing my love to my husband and feeling loved by him, I'm able to tap in, tune in, feel turned on, and really feel loved no matter what color he's painting. Whether he gives me yellow, green, blue, red, purple, lavender, whatever color it is, I have removed the blocks inside me. I have worked through my need to control the situation and am able to genuinely feel the love no matter what the color is. So I've titled this episode Beyond the 5 Love Languages because I think that they are really foundational and extremely useful when your relationship is in a tough spot, a stuck spot, a time of conflict. Identify your love language, identify your partners, and by all means, use the wisdom that is available in understanding the love languages and how they function. But if you're in a phase of really loving your partner, feeling loved, everything is good, and you want to expand and have more passion and more dynamic exchanges and really enjoy being free within your committed relationship, well, it's time to feel the love no matter which language it comes through. And when you do that and your partner does that, the amount of love that is felt, I don't even want to call it an amount, it's not really quantified, but the synergistic impact of getting out of your own way and your own preferences and opening up, opening your heart, opening your soul to receive the love that is coming towards you, that just is a way of living and an access to passion and intimacy that is worth creating. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Marriage Podcast. Please rate and review the show on iTunes. It really makes a difference. And if you have a question or a comment, reach out to me via my website at alexandrastockwell.com.